Welcome to Output, produced by Orbria. Today, we are taking a really fascinating deep dive into a stack of new research. We're looking at the exact mechanisms of how artificial intelligence is rewiring, or I guess as the data suggests, actually unwiring children's brains.
Which is a heavy concept to start with, I know.
Yeah, it really is.
Yeah.
But more importantly, we are focusing heavily on how you, especially those of you who are homeschooling or maybe just supplementing your child's traditional education, how you can actively guide your kids through this massive technological shift.
Right. And to give you a blueprint of where we're heading today, we are going to start at the micro level. We have this striking individual study that attempts to measure cognitive decline in real time.
Right.
And then from there, we'll zoom out to the macro level, looking at a huge institutional analysis of what this trend looks like globally. And finally, we're going to land on a really practical, empowering framework. The goal here is to equip you with the tools to help your child master AI without, losing their own ability to think deeply.
Exactly. We want them to remain independent thinkers. So I want to open with a single striking number that just completely jumped out of the research pile today. It's R equals negative 0.75.
Yeah, that number. What's fascinating here is just how strong of a signal that represents.
Tell us what that actually means in plain English.
Sure. So as anyone who looks at social science research knows, a correlation coefficient of negative 0.75 isn't just a mild trend. It's not a statistical blip.
Yeah.
It is a massive, glaring relationship. And this specific number comes from a study published in January 2025 in the Journal Societies. The research was done by Michael Gerlich over at the SBS Swiss Business School.
Okay, let's unpack how Gerlich actually arrived at that number, because the methodology matters here. He took 666 participants, and he measured two distinct variables. First, he looked at how frequently and intensely these individuals were using AI tools in their daily lives.
Right, the frequency.
Yeah, the frequency. And second, he measured their critical thinking abilities. And what's great is he didn't just ask them, how smart do you feel today? He used specific, established cognitive tasks, heavily relying on the Halpern critical thinking assessment.
Which is a very rigorous tool.
It is. It's designed to test things like global reasoning, argument analysis, decision-making skills, the heavy lifting of the brain.
And that negative 0.75, that is the relationship between those two variables. The data show that the more intense the AI use, the lower the critical thinking scores on the Halpern assessment.
The drop was that significant.
It was. And Gerlich proposes a mechanism for this decline, which he calls cognitive offloading.
Cognitive offloading.
Exactly. The human brain is a ruthlessly efficient organ. It simply does not waste energy maintaining capabilities and neural pathways that it no longer needs to exercise.
It's the ultimate use it or lose it scenario.
Precisely. If a person stops doing the heavy mental lifting, the cognitive muscle essentially atrophies.
Which makes total sense. And we actually see this exact mechanism in our own pockets every single day. Think about your smartphone's contacts app.
Oh, yeah.
Before smartphones, we all had, what, a dozen phone numbers memorized?
At least I knew everyone's home number.
Right. But today, most of us would struggle to recite our best friend's number from memory. The brain realizes it doesn't need to store that information because the device has it covered.
It offloads it.
Exactly. And we see the same thing with GPS navigation. Adults who rely completely on digital maps gradually lose their internal sense of direction. That spatial mapping part of the brain is just entirely offloaded to the satellite.
The GPS and the Contacts app are perfect analogies for the phenomenon itself. But we have to draw a really crucial distinction here when we bring generative AI into the picture.
Okay, lay it out for us.
Consider a traditional calculator. If you offload your arithmetic to a calculator for 20 years, yes, you might lose your mental math skills. You might struggle to do long division on the piece of paper. However, the calculator gives you the definitively correct answer every single time.
Right. 2 plus 2 is always 4.
Exactly. You lose the cognitive skill, but you maintain a reliable, mathematically perfect outcome.
But generative AI doesn't do that. It doesn't operate on definitive mathematical truth. It operates on probability.
Right. It predicts.
Yeah, it gives you a plausible sounding answer. And because it is just predicting the next most likely word in a sequence, that answer might be an entirely fabricated hallucination.
It sounds confident, but it's completely made up.
Exactly. So when a student offloads their thinking to an AI chatbot, they are actually paying a double cost. They are losing the cognitive skill of critical reasoning, and they are losing the reliability of the outcome.
It's a huge trade-off.
It is. They are trading their own hard-won logic for a machine's sophisticated guess.
Which represents a really profound shift in the human-tool relationship. A calculator is a tool of execution. Generative AI acts a lot more like a tool of delegation.
Wow, that's a great way to put it. Tool of delegation.
Oh.
But let's play devil's advocate for a second here,
Yeah.
because we really need to look at this responsibly.
Always.
When I see a massive negative correlation, like that negative 0.75, my first instinct is to ask about the direction of that relationship.
The causation question.
Right. Is the AI actually causing the decline in critical thinking? Or are we just looking at a scenario where people who already struggle with critical thinking are leaning on AI more heavily to do the work for them?
And that is the exact caveat we need to address. Exploring these limits isn't a reason to dismiss the study. I mean, it's an essential part of intellectual honesty and just good AI literacy.
Absolutely.
This was a snapshot study, not a longitudinal one. Gerlich measured a single point in time. He didn't track a single cohort of people over 5 years to prove definitively that the introduction of AI directly caused their cognitive abilities to drop.
So we just know they are linked.
Correct. We only know the two variables are strongly linked, not necessarily which one birthed the other.
And we also have to note that the publisher of the Society's journal, MDPI, actually issued a correction to this study in September 2025.
They did.
The core findings and that massive negative correlation remain completely intact. But the correction just serves as a reminder that this is an incredibly new, rapidly evolving field of research.
Right. The dust hasn't settled.
Exactly. And while 666 participants provides a highly meaningful signal, a signal that researchers take very seriously, it is still just a sample. It isn't a definitive, all-encompassing picture of the entire human population.
True. But despite those necessary caveats, there is a specific demographic trend buried in Gerlich's data that should really make anyone with children pause.
This is the part that stood out to me.
Yeah. The study found that the younger participants showed significantly higher levels of AI dependence, coupled with significantly lower critical thinking scores compared to the older participants.
So the impact is skewed.
Heavily. The impact of this cognitive offloading, whatever the exact directional mechanism might be, is hitting young people the hardest.
And that demographic reality perfectly sets up our transition from the micro to the macro. We have this one striking 666-person data point from a business school in Switzerland. The natural next question is, what happens when we look at this on a systemic level?
Right. Does it hold up?
Do we see the same pattern holding up at scale across the globe?
The data suggests we do. To really understand the scale here, we turn to a major January 2026 report from the Brookings Institution.
Which is a heavy hitter.
Absolutely, a highly respected, nonpartisan policy organization. The report is titled A New Direction for Students in an AI World. It was authored by Mary Burns, Rebecca Winthrop, and their colleagues at the Center for Universal Education.
So this is not a fringe finding.
Not at all. This is a massive synthesis. We are talking about an analysis that reviewed hundreds of individual studies and consulted with 500 stakeholders across 50 different countries.
And the Brookings researchers introduce a concept that sounds intense, but it is incredibly important for parents to understand. They call it the doom loop of AI dependence.
The doom loop. It's a vivid term, and it describes how cognitive offloading isn't just a static event. It becomes a self-reinforcing downward spiral.
How does that actually work in practice?
The mechanism goes like this. A student is faced with a cognitive task. Perhaps they need to draft an analytical essay or reason through some complex historical event. They use AI to generate the ideas and do the heavy lifting for them.
Okay, the initial offload.
Right. And because they aren't exercising their own reasoning skills, their independent capacity for that specific type of task weakens from disuse.
It's that ruthless brain efficiency acting against them.
Exactly. The danger of that efficiency is that the next time the student faces a similar task, it actually feels tangibly harder to them. Their weakened capacity makes the mountain look steeper.
So they panic or just get frustrated.
Yes, and that increased perception of difficulty drives them to rely on the AI even more heavily the second time around.
And round we go.
Right. That increased reliance weakens their capacity further. The MIT researcher Natalia Kosmina has a brilliant term for this condition. She calls it cognitive debt.
Cognitive debt. I like that.
You keep borrowing cognitive labor from the machine, and eventually your own mental bank account is completely empty.
Let's bring back the GPS analogy to make the stakes of this cognitive debt concrete. because the developmental window is really the most critical factor here for the parents listening.
It is the deciding factor.
There is a fundamental biological difference between a 40-year-old using GPS and a 10-year-old using GPS.
Huge difference.
Right. The 4-year-olds spend decades driving around, getting lost, looking at paper maps, and building a robust internal sense of direction. They have the neural pathways. If they start relying exclusively on their phone, sure, they will slowly lose that skill over time.
It fades.
But a 10-year-old who uses a screen to navigate from day one, they aren't just losing an internal map. They may never build those neural pathways in the first place.
That's the scary part.
It really is. Right now, your kids are in the prime developmental window for constructing critical analysis and synthesis skills. If they outsource the foundation of that construction to a chatbot, they are failing to build the architecture of their own minds.
Which naturally leads us to ask about institutional guardrails. What are schools actually doing to manage this developmental risk?
Yeah. Who is steering the ship here?
Well, the unfortunate reality on the ground is that we are operating in a massive policy vacuum. The institutions are lagging significantly behind the technology.
The numbers on this are staggering. Let's look at a survey from RAND, the global policy think tank. They found that 55% of schools have absolutely no formal guidance on how AI should or shouldn't be used.
Over half.
Over half. And when you ask the teachers directly, only 19% reported that their school has implemented a meaningful, actionable AI policy.
And the communication breakdown is even more severe at the younger ages. A survey conducted by the Center on Reinventing Public Education, often referred to as CRPE, found that 96% of elementary school families had received absolutely zero communication from their schools regarding AI policies.
96%. That's practically everyone. And meanwhile, the students are not waiting for the adults to figure it out.
They never do.
According to College Board data, by May of 2025, 84% of high school students were already using generative AI for their schoolwork.
84%.
Yeah. This is not some abstract future scenario we are prepping for. It is the current reality happening right now in your teenager's backpack.
So we have a situation where 84% of students are actively utilizing a tool that has the demonstrated potential to fundamentally alter their cognitive development. And the vast majority of them are navigating this landscape entirely alone.
Left to their own devices, literally.
Literally. And human nature, especially adolescent human nature, dictates that in the absence of clear guidance and friction, the default habit is convenience.
Of course.
A student navigating alone will naturally use the tool to make their life easier and their homework faster, which feeds them directly into the mouth of that doom loop of dependence.
Okay, let's deliberately shift the tone here. We have walked through some heavy, concerning data, from negative correlation coefficients to global doom loops.
It can feel overwhelming.
It can. But this deep dive is not about fear. It is about equipping you. The doom loop is a documented risk, but it is absolutely not an inevitability.
It's not at all.
There is an exit ramp out of this spiral, and as a parent, you have the power to build it for your child today.
And to build that exit ramp, we can turn to a really game-changing framework developed by researcher Chana Gonsalves at King's College London, which she published in the Journal of Marketing Education.
This is such a brilliant way to look at it.
It really is. Gonsalves surveyed this entire landscape and identified a critical nuance. There isn't just one monolithic concept of critical thinking when it comes to artificial intelligence. She says there are two entirely different types of cognitive application.
And understanding this distinction changes the entire approach to AI at home.
Yeah.
The first type she identifies is critical thinking for the assignment.
Meaning the traditional way we think of work.
Exactly. This is the traditional cognitive work. It is using your own reasoning to analyze raw information, draw logical conclusions, and generate original ideas to complete a task from scratch.
But the second type is critical thinking toward the AI.
For the AI.
Right. And this is a completely different mental posture. It involves interrogating the machine's output itself. It is looking at the 5 paragraphs the chatbot just spit out and actively asking, is this actually accurate?
Yes.
How do I empirically know this is true? What underlying biases or assumptions is this machine making to arrive at this conclusion?
That's the key right there. The core problem in the educational landscape right now is that most students are only engaging with the first type of thinking. Or worse, they're letting the AI do the first type for them. That doom loop of dependence we explored earlier is the exact outcome of students using generative AI without ever applying the second type of critical thinking. They're treating the chatbot like a calculator, passively accepting the output as definitive truth.
But observe what happens when you flip the script. Imagine a student uses an AI tool to generate a starting point, perhaps a rough outline for a project or a list of potential historical arguments.
Okay.
If they then actively apply critical thinking toward that AI output, the entire dynamic changes. They are no longer offloading their cognition, they are shifting the nature of the cognitive exercise.
Because instead of sitting at a blank screen struggling to generate ideas from scratch, they are taking on the difficult work of evaluating, verifying, and critiquing a set of provided ideas.
Exactly.
And in the realm of cognitive science, evaluating and synthesizing information is actually considered a higher order skill than basic generation.
They elevate the work. They treat the artificial intelligence not as an infallible oracle, but as a flawed sparring partner.
A flawed sparring partner. I love that. So how do you practically implement this framework at the kitchen table? Because the goal is not to ban AI in your house.
No, avoidance isn't a practical long-term strategy.
It's not. It leaves kids completely unprepared for the technological reality of the modern workforce. The goal is active AI oversight. You can start building these verification habits with your kids tonight.
It's very doable.
A great way to do this is to frame it as a game. We like to call it Spot the Lie.
The mechanics of the game are simple but highly effective. You sit down with your child and open up an AI chatbot. You ask it a complex question about a topic they are currently studying, maybe a specific battle in history or a scientific process like photosynthesis.
Something with a lot of details.
Right, and once the AI generates its response, you hunt for the hallucination together. You actively search for the plausible-sounding sentences that are actually complete fabrications.
You are training a reflex. You want it to become pure muscle memory for your child, to ask one simple question after every single interaction with an AI.
Just 3 words.
How do you know? If the AI confidently states a fact about a historical figure, you ask your child, how do you know that's true? And you make them find a secondary, reliable source to verify it.
You're forcing them to do the work.
Exactly. You are teaching them to view AI output not as an established fact, but as an unverified claim that requires human proof.
And I want to leave you with a final provocative thought to mull over regarding all of this.
Please do.
We spend a lot of time worrying about the risks of AI sounding confidently wrong, but what if that inherent flaw is actually our greatest educational opportunity?
Okay, say more about that.
Think about the generations of students that came before. They were handed heavy textbooks that have been vetted by boards of experts. They are essentially trained to passively absorb and trust that institutional information. They were rarely required to rigorously interrogate their primary sources.
Wow. That is a profound perspective shift. The textbook was the ultimate authority.
It was. But this current generation cannot rely on that passive trust. Because generative AI hallucinates and fabricates, it absolutely forces the user to become a relentless, skeptical fact-checker.
Right.
If you take the time right now in this developmental window to teach your child how to critically evaluate AI, how to cross-reference claims, and how to spot the lie, you are doing much more than just protecting them from cognitive decline.
You're giving them a superpower.
You might actually be helping to raise a generation equipped with the most highly tuned, rigorous, and independent lie detectors in human history. They will be a generation completely immune to taking information at face value.
That is the ultimate empowering takeaway. We aren't just trying to survive this technological wave. We can actively use it to forge sharper, more resilient minds.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much for exploring this research with us today. We highly encourage you to sit down tonight, pull up a prompt, and play a round of Spot the Lie with your kids. You really do have the tools to guide them through this. Thanks for listening, and we will catch you next time on Output, produced by Orbria.